Thank you for tuning in this week. I'm Mike Krause from the Independence Institute. Your usual host, John Caldera, is actually reading picture books to school children as part of his court-ordered community service. So I'll be filling in for you today. Listen, be sure and stick around for the whole show, because a little bit later we're going to be talking about the FDA's power grab over vaping and smoke-free products. But first, we're going to talk about one of the disruptive technologies that's kind of driving the new sharing economy, or the peer-to-peer economy, depending how you like to refer to it, and government's kind of efforts to catch up and grapple with it, and that's short-term rentals. And here to talk about it are a couple people who are covering this issue. Molly Armbrister from the Denver Business Journal. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for coming today.
Sure.
And John Murray from the Denver Post. You're the city beat reporter over there, so you spend a lot of time over at the City Hall.
Yes.
All right. Denver, in a little bit we're going to get to a Denver ordinance that's ready to be voted on that regulates these short-term rentals, right? But a lot of people might not really know what the issue is behind this. It sounds pretty innocuous, a short-term rental. So let me try and describe it. And by the way, this is not a Denver-specific issue, so please don't change the channel just because we're not going to talk about Denver specifically. This is about cities across the state and across the country who are either have, are, or will be grappling with this short-term rental issue. So here's how it works, if I understand it right, and you let me know if I got it. So John, you want to come visit Denver for a 3-day weekend, right? Molly, you have a house and you're going to be out of town for that 3-day weekend, or you've got an extra house or condo or townhome. Mm-hmm. The two of you connect on one of these peer-to-peer online platforms, strike a deal, you come stay in her place, she gives you money, and the platform, the technology company, takes a little slice of that to play middleman. Is that essentially what's happening?
Yeah, on Airbnb, VRBO, those are some of the websites. I mean, that happens every day in Denver. There's something like 2,000 properties listed on Airbnb and some of these other websites in Denver.
Although, just to clarify, in that scenario, if John's the one visiting, he's the one paying me to stay in my
Oh, I would pay John to come stay at my place. No, you're right. But this is basically just a mutually beneficial exchange.
Yeah,
sure.
And you're using this website to connect and make it happen.
Yeah, theoretically, this could have always happened, but functionally, it wasn't going to.
Functionally,
people
it wasn't
don't know each other. And suddenly, you have these platforms, and you can advertise your place. Somebody can look for a place. They see all these listings. It just makes it so much easier that it's just exploded.
But here's the thing: if you two do that, technically, that is against the law.
Right.
In Denver, at least, right?
Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, it's just been on the books in Denver for decades that any lease that's under 30 days is actually illegal under city law, but it's just, the city and the police have just kind of been looking the other way because it's really difficult to enforce. City officials say, it's the kind of thing that people actually have to report that it's happening in their neighborhood, and then it has to be investigated, and they have to prove that it's happening, and it's just a very onerous process. And so the city just hasn't been enforcing it until this vote that's coming up this Monday.
And the one way you could do it, the old concept is a boarding house, right?
Right.
So you could get a license for a boarding house and have that in your neighborhood. Your neighbors probably wouldn't like that you're going to get a license for that because you have to let them know. They would protest it. They may exist in some places, but you advertise it on the outside of the building and all that. It just doesn't exist very much. And city laws or city ordinances just didn't contemplate that Airbnb was going to show up and offer this very easy platform that people would start using.
Right, but it sounds exactly like the old concept of a boarding house when people would simply take temporary boarders into their homes, cook for them, and they'd stay in a room, right? And then what happened was that people didn't like that, so they zoned those out of a lot of neighborhoods and said you have to actually be in an area zoned for a boarding house, right, here in Denver.
Well, it's a special use, yeah,
right.
And it just is very rare.
I got to tell you, this is amazing to me because this is a perfect example of when government goes to act, sometimes they are a lagging indicator of how people are actually arranging their lives and how they're actually interacting with each other and how people are engaging in commerce together. And this has been going on. I mean, the genie's out of the bottle, right? This is going on all over the country. It's not just 2,000 a day in Denver. It's millions a day nationwide, I would assume.
Well, in Colorado, the interesting thing is that you see the largest cities being affected almost last, or realizing it last. Mountain towns and ski resort towns have been ahead of the ball on this, or at least catching up a lot faster than Denver has, because they've got a lot more absentee residents there who saw these sites and decided, oh, well, they may might have before rented it out to ski area workers and things like that when they're not there or in the off season. Now they're making a lot of dough just by putting them on these sites. And you go in Steamboat Springs, you might have a block where half the houses have people who rented them on Airbnb or VRBO for a few days instead of people living there.
All right, so I got to tell you, I have never used Airbnb, but I've used VRBO, and it was fantastic. I got a place, I rented a place from the owner up in Breckenridge for a ski vacation. I didn't have to go through a management company, didn't have to call a hotel, check in. I did this peer-to-peer with this guy right on the website. It was exactly as he advertised. The price didn't change. He was happy, I was happy, and in fact, there was even a place where if I would have been unhappy, you can go and comment, so other people who might want to rent that guy's place could say, you know what? And so in some ways, it's kind of self-policing, but it was a very easy and frankly convenient way to grab a long weekend vacation or a spot up in ski country. So I don't see the problem. So let's talk about why Denver and these other cities, Boulder. I can understand Carbondale, it's up by Aspen, so there's a lot of people going up there to ski. What's the problem? How did they come up with the idea of chasing a regulatory ordinance? Well,
so if you just take a step back and think about it, the imperatives are going to be, or the problems are going to be very different in like Steamboat Springs. There's some housing pressure that people are worried about, that there's less monthly rentals available to people who work up there because of this. But you have a lot more housing stock up there that's just not being used a lot.
There's a lot of second and third homes up there, things like that.
But you look at the city of Denver and people coming to visit, would stay in hotels downtown or somewhere else. Well, now they have this other option, and it might be on your block in the middle of Cherry Creek or on your block in southeast Denver. More often than not, it's in central Denver, we're finding. But people are suddenly seeing, it's not widespread, people are suddenly seeing, people they don't know parking in front of their next door neighbor's house, staying there. Occasionally there might be a loud party or something like that. I think that the complaints are probably more rare than people think, but there have been some. And that makes people uncomfortable to know that this is happening on their block, and it's just less familiarity with the people coming through.
And on the hotel's perspective, I think that a lot of people think that the hotel industry is really up in arms about this, and the truth is that they see it as just another competitor, and the kind of people that stay in short-term rentals are typically different from the kind of people who stay in hotels. So there's not so much concern there from the hotel industry, but one thing that they do want is for short-term rentals to pay the lodging tax in order to even the playing field on that.
That is the trick, right? Because this has been going on for years now, and it's going on every day, but no hotelier tax is being collected or remitted by any of these people who are renting out their places short term.
Correct. And so they're not registered with any government, so there's no.
That is when we talk about the gig economy or we talk about the peer-to-peer economy. That's a big part of it. That this whole thing operates kind of outside the control or the understanding sometimes of local governments and regulatory agencies and bureaucracies. Right. People are literally doing this on their own, and then the governments, in this case Denver, are playing catch up. Is that right? Denver trying to catch up with what's already going on?
And in Denver, it's interesting because it's been a 2-year process as they've been forming this ordinance, and they thought that there might be a consensus that forms, and what's actually happened is that there are kind of some entrenched interests, and they're understandable interests. You've got some neighborhood advocacy groups that are very worried about this type of thing taking off on a larger scale and reducing neighborhood quality of life for the people who are there year-round. But you've also got people who have made very nice second incomes for their families by having investment houses or second or third homes that they rent out on these services. And by and large, they probably operate them responsibly, but there may be some bad actors that are shining a bad light on it. And so they have a very sincere interest in having their housing rights protected as well. And these are conflicting right now. And the council's
so this isn't necessarily reactionary. They're actually trying to be proactive, but it's taken a while to figure out how to do it.
I think so. The genie, like you said, the genie was out of the bottle when they started, but this process started 2 years ago with this kind of sharing economy committee that Mary Beth Sussman on the Denver City Council formed.
Well, and I do want to touch on the idea of investment properties, because Councilwoman Sussman has told me, and this has been widely disputed by the industry, that part of what led her to create this proposal was by the fact that by people buying up investment properties and renting them out on a short-term basis, that takes homes off the market that could be rented or purchased by people who need them. And as we all know, there is a severe housing shortage in Denver. So that was another concern that she brought up, saying that, you know, we're taking homes away from permanent residents in Denver who might need them. Now, like I said, the industry
well, wait a minute.
the industry disputes that pretty vocally, but that is one concern that she had when she was coming up with it.
So essentially, Councilwoman Sussman wanted to say, I want to tell you what you can or can't do with your investment property.
Well, I don't know so much about that, but she's thinking about the larger policy implications in Denver. Right. And I think Molly's probably right or the skeptics are probably right that it's not having a huge substantial impact on the housing market here right now. Potentially it could, and I think there is a lot of worry that you look at San Francisco where there's a lot of angst about that. In New York, Berlin just effectively outlawed these sharing rentals or the short-term rentals through Airbnb and those other sites because of that very worry in some of these popular areas. So Denver is probably a little speculative at this point, but there is, if you think about it, if it takes on such a big scale, it could impact the housing market. So those are the policy implications that they're thinking through right now.
I mean, if we have 2,000 homes right now that are being used for this purpose and it just continues to grow, who's to say that we don't have 20,000 or whatever down the road?
All right, so let's see. Is there a marijuana nexus to this? Because let me make this case here that we have a Clean Air Act. You can't smoke in hotels, right? So I would assume that also covers you can't smoke marijuana in hotels. Is there if you put 420 for everyone at home,
that's happening.
Is code word for marijuana. So if I go onto Airbnb and say, I have a rental, oh, by the way, 420 friendly, so people who might be coming here for marijuana tourism, they'd like that, right?
That's happening. I don't know how widespread it is, but there have been a few anecdotes of people advertising that, because you're right, there are tourists coming to Denver who are looking to partake in our new marijuana economy, and the big conundrum here is that they don't, or conflict is they don't have anywhere to legally use it unless they find a private property that they can do it on.
So it seems to me like that'd be a cash cow if you had an investment property and you put it on there as 420 friendly and you were near a nice, if you were downtown or near a bunch of dispensaries, people would come do, like people do wine tastings, they do pot tastings, right?
Well, and when you think about neighborhood impact of one house being rented up on a block to unfamiliar people, that I think may be one of the concerns that some people have is whether it's speculative or not, that more and more people may be coming to use pot on their block and things like that, and it might foul the air or bring an element that they don't want.
Okay, so let's bring it down to this Denver ordinance. So the ordinance is ready. It's been 2 years, right? And they're ready to vote on this. They'll be voting on it next council meeting. So this will air Friday night. It'll be the following Monday when they'll vote on it. What's this going to do? Give me the quick and dirty on this ordinance.
Well, first of all, it legalizes a small portion of short-term rentals. Okay. So like I was saying before, every lease under 30 days in the city of Denver has been illegal up until this point. This would do away with that, but only for those residences that have registered with the city and only primary residences. So as we were saying before, there are two different kinds of short-term rentals. There's the primary residence where I live there all the time, but I'm gone for a few days, so somebody comes and rents it. And there's the secondary kind, which are, all the investment properties that I might own. So this ordinance would say you can't have all of those investment properties and rent them out on a short-term basis. You can only do your primary residence, and that is what has the industry up in arms.
I would imagine so. What else does this thing do?
Well,
is there any sticking points that whose ox is being gored besides the platform people, the VRBs
well,
and Airbnbs?
that points to a disagreement that has existed on the council. I think by and large this probably has the votes it'll need to pass. But even among some of the supporters, they'd like to see it be a little bit more permissive. And there was even an amendment idea floated that just didn't get enough traction, where several wanted to say, or change it to say, so you could rent out your primary residence, or you can rent out a secondary one a second home you have.
So one or the
just
other.
Not both. Yeah, to give a little bit more flexibility if you do have that second.
And it doesn't look like
residence.
that's going to get included in this.
It probably doesn't, because the neighborhood groups have pushed back against it.
They could always come back and tack that on another time, right?
There's potential.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what's been mentioned by some. Wayne New, who kind of floated this either-or idea. He said, well, look, the neighborhood groups are kind of going to stamp their feet at this point if we do that. But maybe in a year or two, if all hell hasn't broken loose and we have this now legalized sharing economy here, and people are willing to move further, then we can look at going back at it.
Okay, good enough. Well, thanks very much. We're out of time, actually. Molly, Denver Business Journal. People can check you out over at Denver Business Journal.
That's right.
Real Estate Beat. John Murray, of course, over at the Denver Post, covering City Hall. Thanks very much, and we'll be right back.